You need to leave, right now. Dr. Kendrick Thompson looked up from his menu, confused. His wife Angela sat across from him, mid-sentence about their daughter's upcoming college visits. Their two teenagers, Marcus and Jasmine, had been scrolling through their phones while waiting for appetizers at Bennett's Steakhouse, an upscale establishment on Richmond Avenue they'd passed dozens of times but never tried until tonight. This was supposed to be a celebration dinner for Marcus's acceptance into the National Merit Scholarship Program. The woman standing beside their booth wore a crisp white shirt with a gold name tag reading Rachel Morrison, manager. Her arms were crossed, her jaw was set. The restaurant hummed with conversation around them, other diners enjoying Saturday evening meals, oblivious to what was unfolding. "Excuse me?" Angela's legal training kicked in immediately, her voice calm but firm. "Is there a problem?" Morrison's eyes didn't waver. "I've received complaints that you smell like marijuana. This is a family establishment. I need you to leave the premises." The words hit like a physical blow. Kendrick felt his 15-year-old daughter shrink into the booth beside him. His son's eyes went wide with shock and humiliation. Around them, nearby tables had gone quiet. Heads were turning, white faces mostly, watching with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment. "That's absurd," Kendrick said, his voice strained with the effort to remain composed. "We don't smoke marijuana. We've been sitting here for 10 minutes. We just ordered drinks." Morrison stepped closer, her voice dropping but her tone hardening. "Sir, I don't need to debate this with you. Multiple customers have complained about the smell coming from your table. You need to leave voluntarily, or I'll have to call the police." Angela pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly. "I'm recording this. You're accusing us of something without any evidence. We're a family having dinner. My husband is a pediatric surgeon at Children's Memorial. I'm an attorney. Our children are honor students. We have done absolutely nothing wrong." "Ma'am, put that phone away," Morrison snapped. "You're causing a disturbance." "We're causing a disturbance?" Angela's voice rose slightly despite her best efforts. "You walked over here and made a completely false accusation based on nothing. Who complained? What specifically did they say?" "That's not your concern." Morrison gestured toward the entrance. "Please leave, peacefully." Kendrick looked at his children. Marcus's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Jasmine had tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth. His son was the one who broke the silence, his young voice cracking with emotion. "Dad, everyone's staring at us." And that's when Kendrick understood the full weight of what was happening. His children, who'd grown up in a comfortable neighborhood, attended good schools, been shielded from the worst of what America could be, were learning a lesson he'd hoped they'd never have to learn, that your credentials didn't matter, your accomplishments didn't matter. In that moment, to that manager, they were just suspicious black people who didn't belong. Around them, phones were coming out. The couple in the next booth had their camera pointed at the confrontation. A teenager near the bar was openly recording. Morrison noticed but seemed unconcerned, confident in her authority, certain she was in the right. "We're not leaving," Angela said firmly. "We've paid for drinks. We've done nothing illegal. If you call the police, they'll find we're telling the truth, and you'll have a very serious problem." Morrison's face flushed red. "Fine. Have it your way." She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Yes, this is Rachel Morrison at Bennett's Steakhouse on Richmond. I need an officer. I have customers refusing to leave after being asked. They're becoming belligerent." "Belligerent?" Kendrick's voice finally broke with frustration. "We're sitting here quietly. You're the one who came over here with false accusations." The wait for police felt eternal. Other diners had returned to their meals, though conversations remained subdued. The manager stood nearby, arms crossed, occasionally glancing at her watch. The Thompson family sat in terrible silence, drinks untouched. The celebration they had planned turning into a nightmare captured on multiple phones, shared in real time on social media by strangers who'd witnessed the beginning of something much larger than a simple misunderstanding. What Dr. Kendrick Thompson and his family didn't know as they waited was that Rachel Morrison had a history, 17 complaints over 6 years, all buried in personnel files corporate never properly reviewed. 14 of those complaints came from black customers or employees. Each time, management had accepted Morrison's explanations, treated each incident in isolation, never connected the pattern. They didn't know that the owner of Bennett's Steakhouse, David Chen, was in his office reviewing security footage from earlier that evening, alerted by a server who'd witnessed the confrontation, and felt something was wrong, and they didn't know that the police officer about to arrive had his body camera activated, that every word, every gesture, every moment of discrimination was being captured with timestamp and geolocation data that would become evidence in federal court. The door opened. A uniformed officer walked in. Morrison immediately moved to intercept him, already launching into her version of events. But the Thompson family sat straight, hands visible, knowing this moment required perfect composure, even though rage and humiliation burned in their chests. Angela kept her phone recording. Around the restaurant, at least a dozen other phones were doing the same. The evidence was multiplying with every passing second. Rachel Morrison had no idea she'd just set in motion a reckoning that would cost Bennett's Steakhouse $6.4 million and end her career in restaurant management forever. The pattern she'd gotten away with for years was about to be exposed in devastating detail. David Chen watched the security monitor in his back office with growing alarm. The timestamp read 7:42 p.m. The high-definition cameras covering the dining room showed the Thompson family sitting quietly in booth 7. The body language was unmistakable. A family under siege, trying to maintain dignity while being publicly humiliated. He'd been reviewing footage from earlier in the evening, after Sarah, one of his senior servers, had knocked on his door with urgent concern in her eyes. "Mr. Chen, you need to see this. Rachel's done it again." "Done what again?" he'd asked, though something in his gut already knew. "She kicked out a black family, said they smelled like weed. I've been serving them. They don't smell like anything except cologne. This is the third time I've seen her do this in 6 months." Now, watching Rachel Morrison stand beside the booth with crossed arms and an expression of righteous authority, Chen felt cold rage building. He rewound the footage. 7:23 p.m., the Thompson family arrives, well-dressed, clearly celebrating something. 7:25 p.m., they're seated by the hostess. 7:31 p.m., drinks arrive. 7:37 p.m., Rachel walks past their table, slows, looks back, then returns. 7:38 a.m., she stops at their table. Even without audio on the security system, Chen could read the confrontation in the body language. He grabbed his phone and called Rachel's extension. No answer. He tried her cell, straight to voicemail. He stood, straightened his tie, and headed for the dining room. The uniformed officer had just entered when Chen emerged from the back hallway. Officer Martinez, a regular weekend responder to downtown establishments, was listening to Rachel's rapid explanation of disruptive customers and marijuana smell and refusal to cooperate. "Rachel," Chen's voice cut through her. Monologue. His manager turned, surprise flashing across her face. "Mr. Chen, I have this handled. These customers were asked to leave and refused." Chen walked directly to the Thompson family's booth. "Dr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, I'm David Chen. I own Bennett's. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. Can you tell me what happened?" Officer Martinez positioned himself to observe both parties, his body camera capturing everything. Kendrick spoke carefully, his voice steady despite obvious emotion. "We arrived about 20 minutes ago for a family celebration dinner. We ordered drinks. About 10 minutes later, your manager came to our table and accused us of smelling like marijuana. We don't use marijuana. We've done nothing wrong. She demanded we leave and threatened to call police when we asked for an explanation." Chen looked at Rachel. His voice was quiet, controlled, but everyone in the vicinity could hear the steel beneath. "Did you observe any illegal activity? Any drugs or drug paraphernalia? Any actual disturbance beyond this family, sitting quietly and waiting for their order?" Rachel's confidence faltered slightly. "I had complaints from other customers about the smell." "Which customers?" Chen's question was sharp. "Point them out." Rachel hesitated, her eyes scanning the dining room. The elderly couple near the window who'd been sitting before the Thompsons arrived. The businessman at table 12 who'd been engrossed in his laptop. The young couple by the bar who'd been taking selfies. None of them looked like they'd complained about anything. "I'll need specific names and table numbers," Chen continued, "because this is serious. You've publicly accused guests of drug use without evidence. That's defamation at minimum." "Mr. Chen, I was acting to protect the restaurant's reputation." Rachel's voice took on a defensive edge. "I have the authority to remove disruptive guests. They weren't disruptive until you made them that way." Chen turned to Officer Martinez. "Officer, I've reviewed our security footage. This family has been sitting peacefully since they arrived. No drugs, no disturbance, no reasonable basis for asking them to leave. My manager was wrong. Martinez looked between Chen and Rachel, his body camera capturing the dynamic shift. So there's no complaint from the establishment? No trespass request? None, Chen said firmly. These guests are welcome. He turned back to the Thompson family, and the regret in his voice was genuine. Dr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson, your entire meal tonight is on the house. It's inadequate compensation for what you've experienced, but it's a start. I'm deeply sorry this happened in my restaurant. Angela spoke, her attorney voice clear and measured. Mr. Chen, we appreciate your intervention, but this needs to be more than an apology. Your manager just racially profiled our family in front of dozens of witnesses. Our children just learned that being black professionals with honor, students means nothing when someone decides you don't belong. You're absolutely right, Chen said. He looked at Rachel. You're suspended effective immediately. Leave your keys and go home. We'll discuss your employment status tomorrow. Rachel's face went white. Mr. Chen, you're going to believe these people over me? I've worked here for 6 years. You've had 17 complaints in those 6 years, Chen said, the words heavy with meaning. I should have paid attention sooner. That's on me. But it ends now. The dining room had gone completely silent. Every table was watching the drama unfold. Sarah, the server who'd alerted Chen, stood near the kitchen entrance with visible relief on her face. The other servers exchanged meaningful glances. This had been building for years. Rachel Morrison pulled her keys from her pocket and slammed them on the nearest table. You're making a mistake. She turned to the Thompsons. You people are too sensitive. It was a simple misunderstanding. The words hung in the air. You people. Officer Martinez's body camera captured it clearly. Several diners gasped. One person recording on their phone audibly muttered, "Oh my God!" Chen's voice was ice. Get out, now, before I have Officer Martinez escort you for trespassing. Rachel left, her footsteps loud in the silent restaurant. The door swung shut behind her. Chen turned back to the Thompson family, exhaustion and anger warring in his expression. I wish I could undo what happened. What she did was wrong. What I should have prevented by acting sooner on previous complaints was wrong. I hope you'll consider giving us another chance someday. Jasmine Thompson, the 15-year-old who'd been crying earlier, spoke for the first time, her voice small but clear. Will she get fired for real? Or is this just for show? Chen looked at the teenager, recognizing the depth of the question. This is for real, I promise you. But that promise, as genuine as it was, couldn't undo the damage. The Thompsons' celebration dinner was ruined. The humiliation was recorded on multiple devices. The trauma was real. And the pattern of discrimination that had been enabled by inadequate oversight was about to explode into public consciousness. The video hit social media within 30 minutes, 12 different angles from 12 different phones, all showing the same scene. A well-dressed black family being accused of smelling like marijuana and threatened with police while trying to have dinner at an upscale restaurant. The hashtag Bennett Steakhouse was trending locally within an hour, nationally by morning. Sarah Martinez, the server who'd alerted David Chen, provided the most damaging evidence. She'd worked at Bennett's for 3 years and had kept detailed notes on her phone about incidents she'd witnessed. When the Thompson lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later by civil rights attorney Marcus Reeves, Sarah's documentation became the roadmap for discovering just how deep Rachel Morrison's pattern of discrimination went. The attorney conference room at Reeves & Associates overlooked downtown through floor-to-ceiling windows. Charts covered one wall, each documenting a separate incident. Reeves, a 52-year-old attorney with 20 years of civil rights litigation experience, stood before his team and the Thompson family, laying out what their investigation had uncovered. We found 18 separate incidents over Morrison's 6-year tenure, Reeves began, gesturing to the timeline. 17 involved black customers or employees. The 18th was a Hispanic family she accused of being undocumented and likely to skip the check. Dr. Thompson sat with Angela, both taking notes. Their children weren't present for this meeting, spared the details, but not the trauma. Kendrick's voice was tight. How did she keep her job? That's the question corporate is going to have to answer, Reeves replied. He pulled up a document on the screen. Each complaint was investigated in isolation. Morrison would deny wrongdoing. There was rarely video evidence because most incidents happened in areas not fully covered by cameras, or the footage was never properly preserved. Each time, she received counseling or sensitivity training and was sent back to work. He clicked through incident reports. August 2019, black couple accused of being too loud. Asked to leave despite neighboring white table being measurably louder on audio testing. November 2019, black male customer accused of not having a reservation when he clearly did. Told no tables were available while multiple empty tables visible. March 2020. Black family told their children were too disruptive, asked to keep them quiet, while white family with equally active children received no comment. The pattern was damning, pretextual reasons that sounded legitimate, selective enforcement of policies, always black customers, always public humiliation, always Morrison's word taken over the customer's complaints. But there's more, Reeves continued. We pulled Morrison's personnel file through Discovery. She was a supervisor at a restaurant in Dallas before Bennett's. She left that job after 3 formal complaints about racial discrimination. She was asked to resign rather than be fired. Angela Thompson's legal mind was already racing. So Bennett's hired someone with a documented history of racial discrimination, received 17 more complaints during her employment, and never fired her or seriously disciplined her? Correct, Reeves confirmed. That's where the corporate liability becomes overwhelming. This wasn't just one manager going rogue. This was systemic failure of oversight. He pulled up another document. The corporate office received complaint notifications on 14 of the 17 incidents. Each time, local management was trusted to handle it. Each time, Morrison was retained. He clicked through complaint summaries. May 2020, black woman celebrating promotion, Morrison asked, her to prove she could pay before ordering. Woman left crying. No consequences. September 2020, black teenager applying for job, Morrison told him position was filled. White teenager applied next day, was hired immediately. EEOC complaint filed, settled quietly for $15,000. January 2021, black family on Valentine's Day. Morrison claimed their reservation was lost, no tables available. Security footage showed empty tables, reservation clearly visible in computer system. Corporate settled for $8,000. June 2021, black businessman entertaining clients. Morrison questioned validity of his corporate card, demanded ID and secondary payment method. White customers never asked. Client called NAACP, complaint filed. Corporate settled for $12,000. The settlements kept coming. Small amounts meant to make problems disappear quietly. Non-disclosure agreements ensuring no public attention, no pattern recognition, no accountability. Dr. Thompson's voice was bitter. They were paying. People off to stay quiet while keeping her employed to discriminate against more people. That's exactly what happened, Reeves confirmed. And it's going to cost them significantly more than those small settlements. He pulled up financial analysis. Bennett's Steakhouse is part of a restaurant group with 47 locations. Annual revenue last year was $180 million. They have insurance, but their policy has limits and exclusions for discrimination claims. More importantly, their corporate structure shows knowledge and deliberate indifference. He displayed internal emails obtained through Discovery. From regional manager to HR. Rachel's had another complaint. Customer seems overly sensitive. Rachel denies any bias. Recommend diversity refresher training. From corporate counsel to regional manager. Settling the September incident for $15,000. Rachel needs to be more careful, but no termination necessary. From GM to district manager. Rachel's tough but effective. She keeps the restaurant running smoothly. Some customers just look for reasons to complain. The emails were devastating. Corporate knowledge. Conscious decisions to retain Morrison despite clear pattern. Financial decisions to settle complaints rather than address the source. The legal exposure was catastrophic. But the most damaging evidence came from Bennett's own security system. Reeves had subpoenaed footage from 2 years of Morrison's employment. A video forensics expert analyzed her behavior across hundreds of hours of footage, tracking how she interacted with customers of the different races. The numbers were stark. Morrison approached black customers within 5 minutes of seating 67% of the time. She approached white customers within 5 minutes only 12% of the time. When she approached black customers, she questioned their reservations, their ability to pay, or their behavior 43% of the time. Comparable rate for white customers, 3%. Black customers were asked to leave or threatened, with removal in 14 documented instances. White customers, 0. The statistical analysis proved what everyone already knew but needed documented. Rachel Morrison's discrimination wasn't random or coincidental. It was systematic, measurable, and enabled by corporate indifference. Angela looked at the charts covering the wall. Each one represented someone's humiliated dinner, someone's ruined celebration, someone's children learning about racism in the most painful way possible. How many others? She asked quietly. How many people didn't complain, didn't file reports, just left and never came back? Reeves shook his head. We'll never know. But based on the pattern, likely dozens more. The Thompson case would become the vehicle for accountability. The federal lawsuit filed by Marcus Reeves on behalf of the Thompson family named 3 defendants: Rachel Morrison individually, Bennett's Steakhouse corporate entity, and Richmond Restaurant Group, the parent company. The complaint alleged violations of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination in public accommodations, and state civil rights statutes. The damages sought, $6.4 million. Corporate lawyers for Richmond Restaurant Group initially planned to fight. Their first response, filed 30 days after the complaint, was a motion to dismiss, arguing the allegations didn't show intentional discrimination, just customer service decisions gone wrong. The motion cited Morrison's explanations for each incident: legitimate concerns about policy violations, honest misunderstandings, overreactions by sensitive customers. That strategy lasted exactly 48 hours. When depositions began and video evidence was presented, when the full scope of Morrison's pattern became undeniable, when internal emails showed corporate knowledge and deliberate indifference, Richmond's board of directors made a calculation. Taking this case to trial with video footage from multiple angles, statistical analysis showing clear disparate treatment, and 18 documented incidents across 6 years would result in a jury verdict potentially exceeding $20 million. The settlement negotiations began in earnest 3 months after filing. Marcus Reeves sat across a polished conference table from Richmond Restaurant Group's attorneys, their outside counsel from a white shoe firm, their insurance representatives, and their crisis management consultants. The room was tense. "Your client has a choice," Reeves began, his tone conversational but firm. "Settle now with meaningful accountability measures, or face a jury in a city that's 60% minority, where a dozen videos of my client's humiliation have been viewed millions of times, and where your own documents prove you knew you had a problem and chose to do nothing." Richmond's lead attorney, a woman named Patricia Vandenberg with 30 years of corporate defense experience, leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves, discrimination cases are difficult to prove. Customer service disputes happen. Our position is that this was an unfortunate misunderstanding, not actionable discrimination." Reeves pulled out a tablet and played video. The Thompson family's incident from 4 different angles, audio crystal clear. Rachel Morrison's accusation, the family's dignified response, the humiliation visible on their children's faces, the "you people" comment captured perfectly. Then he showed the statistical analysis, the pattern evidence, the prior settlements. Misunderstanding? Reeves's voice was calm but cutting. 18 separate incidents, millions in prior settlements, internal emails showing corporate knowledge. This isn't a customer service dispute. This is systematic discrimination enabled by corporate indifference. He slid a document across the table. "And this is what it's going to cost you." The settlement demand included $3.2 million in compensatory damages to the Thompson family for emotional distress, humiliation, and the trauma experienced by their children. $3.2 million in punitive damages to punish Richmond Restaurant Group's deliberate indifference. Mandatory implementation of comprehensive anti-discrimination policies across all 47 restaurants. Third-party monitoring of discrimination complaints for 5 years. Mandatory diversity training for all management employees quarterly. Establishment of anonymous reporting hotline for discrimination complaints. Public admission of wrongdoing and commitment to change. termination of Rachel Morrison's employment with prejudice, ensuring she could never work for the company again. Vandenberg reviewed the numbers, consulted quietly with her clients, then looked back at Reeves. The punitive damages are excessive. Our insurance doesn't fully cover intentional discrimination claims. You're asking us to essentially bankrupt a successful business over one manager's mistakes. One manager you kept employed, despite 18 complaints over 6 years, Reeves countered. One manager you transferred from location to location instead of firing. One manager whose discrimination you settled quietly multiple times while allowing her to continue discriminating against new victims. You didn't have one bad apple. You had a system designed to protect that bad apple while she destroyed people's dignity. The negotiations stretched across 2 months. Richmond made counteroffers, $1.5 million total, no admission of wrongdoing. Reeves rejected it. $2.8 million, limited reforms. Rejected. $4.2 million, most of the requested changes, but no public admission. Still rejected. The breakthrough came when Richmond's board realized the alternative. Marcus Reeves had been contacted by 7 additional families who'd experienced discrimination at Bennett's locations, all willing to testify. He had expert witnesses prepared to explain systematic discrimination. He had the NAACP preparing to file an amicus brief supporting the case. He had national media ready to cover a trial that would expose not just one restaurant, but patterns common across the hospitality industry. The final settlement, agreed to 96 days after the lawsuit was filed, $6.4 million total, $3.7 million to the Thompson family, $2.7 million distributed among 13 other verified victims of Morrison's discrimination, including the 7 who'd contacted Reeves and 6 from earlier settlements who'd signed NDAs that were now void due to the pattern evidence. Comprehensive reforms across all Richmond Restaurant Group properties, including mandatory bias training, independent monitoring, anonymous reporting systems, and demographic data collection on all complaints. Public statement from Richmond, acknowledging systematic failures and committing to meaningful change. Rachel Morrison was terminated during the settlement negotiations. She filed a wrongful termination suit, claiming she was made a scapegoat, that corporate had approved her actions, that she was following policy. Her case was dismissed when her own history of complaints and the video evidence made her claims untenable. Her discrimination pattern followed her to every subsequent job application in the hospitality industry. Her career in restaurant management ended, but Morrison wasn't prosecuted criminally. Civil rights violations rarely result in individual criminal charges against civilians, unless there's physical violence involved. The punishment was financial, reputational, professional. The system held her accountable within its limits. The day the settlement was finalized, Dr. Kendrick Thompson stood with his family on the courthouse steps, Marcus Reeves beside them, facing media cameras. His voice was steady but emotional. No amount of money can undo what my children experienced that night. The humiliation, the helplessness, the lesson that their accomplishments and their dignity could be questioned based solely on their skin color. But this settlement says that discrimination has consequences, that companies can't protect employees who discriminate, that black families deserve to dine in peace. Angela added, "We're donating a portion of our settlement to establish a fund that provides legal representation to others who face discrimination in restaurants and public accommodations. Because we know how many people experience this and don't have the resources to fight back, the cameras captured it all, the Thompson family's dignity, their determination, the victory that was also a wound that wouldn't fully heal, justice achieved but at tremendous cost." A year after the settlement, Bennett's Steakhouse on Richmond Avenue was unrecognizable from the establishment where the Thompson family's nightmare unfolded. David Chen had implemented changes that went far beyond the settlement requirements, driven by genuine remorse and recognition that his failure to act sooner had enabled years of discrimination. The restaurant's training program became a model in the industry. Every employee, from dishwashers to general managers, completed quarterly anti-bias training with real scenarios, role-playing, and accountability measures. The anonymous reporting hotline received 23 calls in the first year, each investigated by a third-party monitor with findings reported publicly. 2 managers were terminated for discriminatory comments. 3 received additional training after customer complaints. The transparency was unprecedented. Chen personally met with community leaders from the NAACP, the Urban League, and local black business organizations. He established a community advisory board that reviewed policies, heard concerns, and provided input on creating genuinely inclusive environments. The board had real authority to recommend changes, and Chen implemented every suggestion they provided. The demographic data told a transformative story. Year 1 before the incident. Black customers represented 8% of diners at Bennett's, despite the neighborhood being 35% black. Year 1 after reforms, 27% and rising. Customer satisfaction surveys from black patrons improved from 62% positive to 94% positive. The business case for inclusion was proven. Treating all customers with dignity was not only morally right, it was financially beneficial. But the impact extended far beyond one restaurant. Richmond Restaurant Group's entire portfolio underwent transformation. 47 locations, each implementing identical standards. Centralized complaint tracking that identified patterns before they became lawsuits. Management evaluations that included diversity metrics and customer satisfaction across demographic groups. The cost was significant, $2.3 million in the first year for training, monitoring, and system changes. The result was measurable improvement across every metric that mattered. The Thompson family's experience became a teaching case. Law schools used it to illustrate Title II violations and corporate liability. Business schools examined the cost of discrimination versus the cost of prevention. Hospitality management programs made it required viewing for understanding how bias manifests in service industries and why systematic accountability matters. Dr. Kendrick Thompson and Angela became reluctant advocates. They testified before the city council about discrimination in public accommodations, supported state legislation to strengthen civil rights enforcement, and spoke at universities about their experience. Their children, Marcus and Jasmine, now college students, had processed the trauma with counseling and perspective. They wrote essays about the incident for college applications, using their pain to discuss resilience, and the ongoing fight for equality. "We learned something terrible that night," Jasmine told an audience at her high school's diversity assembly. "We learned that being educated, professional, accomplished black people doesn't protect you from racism. But we also learned that speaking up matters. That documentation matters. That accountability is possible. What happened to us shouldn't happen to anyone. But if it does, you don't have to accept it silently." The legal fund Angela established with their settlement money provided representation to 37 discrimination cases in its first 18 months. 12 settled favorably. 4 went to trial, with 3 victories. 21 were still in litigation. The fund hired 2 full-time attorneys and partnered with law school clinics to maximize reach. Discrimination victims who would have been forced to accept injustice now had advocates. Rachel Morrison's story ended differently. After her termination from Bennett's, she struggled to find management positions in hospitality. Background checks revealed the lawsuit, the settlement, the documented pattern of discrimination. She worked briefly at 2 smaller restaurants, but complaints emerged at both within months. Eventually, she left the industry entirely. She never publicly apologized or acknowledged wrongdoing, maintaining to the end that she'd been treated unfairly, that she'd simply been enforcing standards, that she was the real victim. But the statistical evidence, the video footage, the testimony of dozens of people she'd discriminated against, told a different truth. Rachel Morrison was a case study in how unchecked bias, protected by inadequate corporate oversight, could destroy lives while building a career on discrimination. The system had finally held her accountable, but only after years of damage. The broader hospitality industry watched the Bennett's case with attention. The $6.4 million settlement sent shockwaves through restaurant groups nationwide. Insurance companies adjusted premiums based on discrimination training and complaint tracking systems. Corporate offices implemented reforms proactively rather than reactively. The National Restaurant Association developed industry-wide best practices for preventing and addressing discrimination, citing the Thompson case as a cautionary example of costs when prevention fails. But discrimination didn't end. New cases emerged regularly. The Cork and Bull case in Virginia, where 9 black women were told to leave after a fight they weren't involved in because management assumed y'all like to fight resulted in a $5 million lawsuit. The Tavala case in Pennsylvania, where white servers refused to serve black customers and racist jokes were standard, sparked another federal investigation. The pattern persisted, fueled by bias that training couldn't always overcome, and oversight that remained imperfect. The Thompson case became a landmark because of several critical factors converging. Multiple video recordings from independent sources documenting the entire incident. A restaurant owner who chose accountability over denial. An attorney willing to fully investigate the pattern rather than settling quickly. A corporate structure that left documented evidence of knowledge and indifference. And a family with the resources and resilience to pursue justice rather than accept humiliation silently. 1 year after the settlement, Bennett's Steakhouse hosted a community dinner. The Thompson family attended, returning to the scene of their trauma in a gesture of healing and recognition of genuine change. David Chen gave a brief speech acknowledging the past, committing to the future, and thanking the family for their courage. Kendrick Thompson stood before the assembled crowd of community members, staff, and media. His voice was measured, his words chosen carefully. What happened to my family here should never have happened. That it did happen reflects problems that extend far beyond one manager or one restaurant. Discrimination in public accommodations continues because it's often subtle, often deniable, often unpunished. But when there's video evidence, when there's pattern documentation, when there's accountability, things can change. He looked at his children, now young adults shaped by trauma, into advocates. We can't undo the past, but we can demand better for the future. That's what this settlement represents. Not just money, though that matters, but structural change, accountability, recognition that every person deserves dignity when they walk through that door. Angela added the final thought, her attorney's precision making the point unmistakable. Title II of the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964 to end segregation in public accommodations. 60 years later, we're still fighting for that promise. The Thompson case isn't the end. It's one battle in an ongoing war against discrimination. Every time someone stands up, documents what happened, refuses to accept injustice quietly, we move closer to a country where dining while black doesn't require courage. The applause was genuine. The change was real, at least in this one place. But the broader battle continued. One confrontation, one lawsuit, one reckoning at a time. The cost of discrimination had been established, $6.4 million and counting. The question was whether the industry would learn before the next family paid the price of someone else's bias. The Thompson family left that night through the same door they'd been asked to exit in humiliation a year before. This time, they walked out with their heads high, knowing they'd force change that would protect others. Justice, imperfect but real, achieved through documentation, determination, and the refusal to accept that their dignity was negotiable. The lesson was simple but hard-won. When discrimination is recorded, when patterns are exposed, when accountability is demanded, change becomes possible. Not easy, not complete, but possible. And in America, that had to be enough to keep fighting.